Hello class. A lot of the most fun and interesting Pokemon are Frail, as it typically means they have excellent speed, attacking stats, or both. Some Frail Pokemon are top tiers thanks to these strengths in other areas, like Dragapult and Iron Valiant. Others, like Hisuian, Zoroark, and Mienshao, haven't managed to overcome their poor defenses. But whether you're trying to make a Frail low-tier Pokemon work in a higher tier, or you just want to make the most of your Dragapult, it's important to know how to team build with Frail Pokemon. Pokemon with solid defensive stats are just easier to build with. Nobody ever had trouble fitting a Tinglu or a Zamazenta onto a team. If you don't consider the frailty of Pokemon when team building, even top tiers like Dragapult will feel clunky and difficult to play. If you want to have a Frail Pokemon on your team, to make the most of it, you'll want at least one of the following four things. 1. Lots of pivots. 2. An offensive team. 3. Aurora Veil or Light Screen Reflect, or 4. EV investment and a nature that makes the frail Pokemon not frail anymore. This list is a bit simplified and there are lots of exceptions and context needed, so let's go through these one by one using examples. All examples I show in this video will be in the most popular format for competitive singles, Scarlet and Violet overused, but the concepts I go over will apply to almost all singles formats. And as always, all teams shown in the background footage are linked in the description. So, first up, number 1, you can support frail Pokemon with lots of pivots. A pivot is just a Pokemon that has some way of switching. For the most part, that comes in the form of switching moves, like U-turn, Volt Switch, Flip Turn, Parting Shot, Teleport, or Chilly Reception. Frail Pokemon struggle to switch in due to their poor defenses. Pivots can help them enter without risking damage. Slow pivots like Galarian Slowking and Alomomola are often best at this, since they can consistently bring your frail Pokemon in safely after the opposing Pokemon has already attacked, but faster pivots like Dragapult or Zapdos are still very helpful, and can bring the frail Pokemon in safely if the opponent switches on the turn you click the pivoting move. In the background footage, Weavile is the frail Pokemon in question. This team has 3 pivots. U-turn Gliscor, Volt Switch Raging Bolt, and Chilly Reception Galarian Slowking, which has the added benefit of giving Weavile a defense boost with the snow it sets. This is a hazard stack team. The idea is to set Stealth Rock and Spikes and wear down bulky teams with those hazards, but since bulky teams use a lot of heavy-duty boots, a strong knockoff Pokemon is vital to making this strategy work. On this team, that's Weavile. But if I had to switch Weavile in every time I brought it onto the field, it wouldn't survive long even against more passive, bulky teams. You can predict and just switch Weavile in on turns where you don't expect your opponent to attack, but that's not a reliable strategy. These pivots offer a lot of consistency. Next, number 2, you can support frail Pokemon by putting them on an offensive team. The frail Pokemon I built around for the team in this background footage is Blaziken, but Ironmoth and Serperior are also quite frail. Frail Pokemon naturally fit very easily on offensive teams, particularly Hyper Offense. That's because an offense team generally is a collection of fast, frail Pokemon. The idea is simply to beat your opponent with speed and power before they beat you. Offensive teams don't have defensive cores that are designed to last very long, and Hyper Offense teams don't have a defensive core at all. Nothing about this archetype is designed for the long run, so these teams typically create very short games. The more offensive a team is, the shorter games are, and the easier it is to fit on frail Pokemon. Not being able to take hits well isn't a problem when defensive play isn't a big part of the game plan. Particularly on Hyper Offense, the game plan is to let Pokemon die and rarely switch at all. The previous Hazard Stack team we looked at with Weavile, that team needs to last a long time, and Weavile needs to enter the field many times, but it can't take many hits, so it needs pivots to bring it in safely. But if you put Weavile on a Hyper Offense team, it probably doesn't need to enter multiple times. It needs to enter once, it probably clicks Swords Dance, it attacks until it dies, and you move on to the next Pokemon. Just building an offensive team is for sure the easiest way to make frail Pokemon work. The problem is that this doesn't work for all frail Pokemon, only fast frail Pokemon. You'll notice for the team in the background footage, Blaziken, Serperior, and Ironmoth are all very fast Pokemon. Frail and slow Pokemon, like Gallade and Hoopa Unbound for instance, generally do not work well on offense teams. Being frail and slow at the same time is a very difficult challenge to overcome, and these Pokemon need to pick their entry opportunities very carefully. Anything faster with decent attack can just KO them, so they need to enter on slower Pokemon that they can offensively threaten. For slow and frail Pokemon, you'll generally want to go with the pivoting approach to build around them, so they have an easier time finding these entry opportunities. If you try to put, say, an Assault Vest Gallade on a Hyper Offense team, you'll be very disappointed. Pokemon are constantly dying on Hyper Offense, so the Pokemon on these teams can't be too picky with their entry opportunities. They need to be able to outspeed the opposing threats, or take a lot of damage, and start hitting hard right away. Gallade has such poor HP, physical defense, and speed that it will likely die without doing much at all if you put it on a very offensive team, where it doesn't have the time to carefully pick the right time to enter the field. The exception is Sticky Web teams. Sticky Web teams effectively remove the slow flaw from these Pokemon, so you could probably use a Swords Dance Gallade or a Nasty Plot Hoopa Unbound pretty well on a Sticky Web team. I wouldn't recommend it, as I think there are stronger Sticky Web abusers, but it certainly wouldn't be bad. So in summary, the easiest way to build with a frail Pokemon is just to build an offensive archetype, but this generally only works with fast frail Pokemon, not slow frail Pokemon. Before we move on to number 3, if you're getting something out of this video, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. It helps out a lot. Now, number 3. The next way to support frail Pokemon is to give them either Aurora Veil or Light Screen and Reflect support. This kind of goes along with the last point because almost every single team using Aurora Veil or Dual Screens is a Hyper Offense team, but it's a very different kind of Hyper Offense team. The key difference is that this does work for slow and frail Pokemon, as long as they have some way to boost their stats. In the background footage, Veluza is the frail Pokemon I built around. With Fillet-Away, Stored Power, and Mold Breaker, Veluza is actually amazing at breaking bulky teams. Due to all the health lost from Fillet-Away though, and Veluza's poor bulk, it really has no shot of setting up without Aurora Veil. Remember though, for Aurora Veil to be an effective way of supporting your frail Pokemon, setup is generally necessary. You wouldn't want to waste a team slot on your Aurora Veil team for a Yanmega. It's frail, yes, but there are way better Pokemon to take advantage of Aurora Veil. Now, number 4. The last way to support frail Pokemon is just by using EV investment in natures to make them not frail anymore. Now, this sounds silly, but let me explain. For the most part, this is a terrible idea. Investing, say, a Weavile in physical defense and HP is absolutely horrible, and if anyone does that and says I told them to do it, I will find you and I will stop you. There are some cases, though, where frail Pokemon can turn into not frail Pokemon and function well. Talonflame is a prime example of this. It has poor bulk, but if you invest in HP and defense, you can take advantage of its solid defensive typing and access to defog, and use it on stall teams. Hawlucha can do this as well. It uses Mold Breaker plus Defog to bypass Goldengo's Good as Gold. Cyclizar is also very frail, but with HP investment, an Assault Vest, and Regenerator, it can become a decent wall and removal Pokemon. I've even experimented with a defensive Toxtricity with Nuzzle and Toxic. You'd be surprised how well Pokemon with HP and defenses in the 70s can take hits. EV investment is not a multiplier based on the Pokemon's stats. It's a flat addition of 63 points if you invest 252 EVs. Since how much damage a Pokemon takes from hits is a multiplicative equation, basically multiplying HP by physical or special bulk to determine how bulky a Pokemon is on the physical or special side, Pokemon with lower defense stats actually get more out of EV investment than Pokemon with higher defensive stats. They still end up less bulky, for sure, their stats are still lower, but EVs really help close the gap. So if there's a frail Pokemon you think has really useful defensive attributes, consider investing into HP and defenses and see how it does. I think you'll be surprised by how bulky it is. Alright, that's how to make frail Pokemon fit well onto teams. Let's do a quick summary. So the ways to support frail Pokemon are, number 1, have lots of pivots. This is helpful for all frail Pokemon and most appreciated by frail breakers. Number 2, have it be an offensive team. This works best for fast frail Pokemon. Slow frail Pokemon generally shouldn't be on offense or hyper offense unless it's Sticky Web. Number 3, support the frail Pokemon with Aurora Veil or Dual Screens. This works for frail Pokemon with impressive stat boosting capabilities. And number 4, make the frail Pokemon not frail through EV investment. This is very rarely the right approach, but if a frail Pokemon has lots of useful defensive properties without the stats to back it up, the right support and EV investment can turn it into a capable wall. Something else I should mention is that there isn't a specific one of these 4 approaches for each Pokemon. Something like Veluza can probably only work with Aurora Veil or Dual Screens, sure, But for something like Blaziken, earlier I showed you a team that made it work by just being very offensive, but I've also had a lot of success using Blaziken on a more balanced team, making use of Rillaboom and Alomomola as pivots. Also remember, these 4 approaches to building with Frail Pokemon are not the only things you need to consider when adding a Frail Pokemon to the team. When building around Weavile, I didn't just add Raging Bolt because it was a pivot. Raging Bolt struggles with Pokemon like Ting-Lu, Gliscor, and Galarian Slowking, which Weavile helps with, and Raging Bolt confidently enters the field on Pokemon that Weavile hates, like Moltres, Corviknight, and Dondozo. Considering synergy and other good team building principles is important. The point of this video is to help you implement Frail Pokemon onto your team and utilize them to their maximum potential, but for more general building guides, I'd recommend checking out my Team Building Guides playlist. If you enjoyed the video and or learned something, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. It helps out a lot. And if you have any questions or there's something else you want to say, leave a comment and I'll do my best to respond to them all. Well, that's all. Class dismissed.